everybody. Welcome to Running to Win. My name is Kim White, and I'm the host of Running to Win. And I am excited again this week to continue in a series that we've been doing for actually, we just started last week. It's a 3-part series, and this is part 2. And I'm excited to have my guest on today, Apostle Michael Fram. I've known him for probably a couple of years now. We became connected at a time in my life when I just really needed a friend, and we've become good friends and everything. And I've the thing I've noticed about Apostle Michael is whenever he teaches or he talks, it's something that just drills right into your heart. And it really just makes sense, and it brings you to a higher level in what you believe in your faith and everything. And I have a lot of honor for this man. And he was actually my second guest on this broadcast when we ever first started. But today I want to bring him back on. I urge you to go back and listen to part 1 from our last week's broadcast, because we're talking about a very important subject, I believe, for anybody that's called to ministry, anybody that's really even walking through the Christian walk, and that is the heart of a father. So Apostle Michael, why don't you come on? And I want you, before you get started in your teaching, just to talk a little bit about your ministry, Prophetic Destiny Ministries International. Just tell us a little tiny bit about that before you get going and everything, so people can kind of know who you are.
Well, I'd be honored to do that. Thank you so much, Kim, for having me back on again and letting me be a part of your broadcast and to support you in what God has called you to do as well, and giving me access to your platform, which I greatly appreciate. And I don't take it lightly that you allow me to do that. But Prophetic Destiny is really an offshoot or an extension of my parents' ministry. And my parents' ministry is Living Faith Ministries International, and was started initially as a missionary evangelistic organization. And the motto was taking the word to the world by ministering at home and abroad, and being in ministry with them, working with them. And I still work with mom and dad. But there came a point in my life when, your folks are amazing when they understand things and see dynamics that you don't see. Mm-hmm. And my mom said to me, Michael, you need to begin to establish your own identity. And so the first step for me in establishing my own identity, when I started in ministry, I was really accepted because I was Leo and Eda's son. And I had acceptance because mom and dad were accepted. Mm-hmm. So people just accepted me as being the third Fram, and they really did pave the way for me, which, if you heard part of the prophetic word that I received back in 1982 from Papa Dorn, that your parents are blazing a trail that you yourself are going to walk, that really began to happen. And I was accepted because of them. And we got to this place in ministry where mom said, you need to establish your own identity. And so the first step for that was, mom said, you need to get your own business card. Because we used to have one business card, and at the time it said Apostle Leo Fram, Apostle Edith Fram, and Prophet Michael Fram. And we all had the same business card. And we had, their phone number was on it, my phone number was on it, and it was all just the LFMI, Living Faith Ministries International website. And that's all that was on the business card. We didn't even have email addresses on that business card back in those days. And so that's what we had. And mom said, you need to get your own business card. And so I kept all the same information, but had one just for me, just for Prophet Michael Fram. And so I did that. And it was about another year or so after that. And mom said to me, all right, now's the next step. You need to establish your own ministry. And I didn't want to do it. And I was like, I feel like I'm dishonoring you if I start my own ministry. And mom said, no. She said, make a sub ministry under Living Faith and create your own website. It can still be under Living Faith, will be the parent ministry, but it will be the next step in you developing your own identity. And my mom said to me that at that point, she says, the day is coming where your reach and what you're going to do is going to be larger than ours. And you got to grow your own identity and prepare for that. And I said, but I'm dishonoring you. And they said, no, you're not dishonoring us. You honor us plenty. You're just preparing for where God's taking you. And so I established my own identity, my own ministry. Now, I've had an email address for years, even at that time, and it was prophetic_destiny has been, my email address. And so when it came to establishing my own ministry and my own website, I just talked to the people that were in the circle. I said, well, how about if I just go with Prophetic Destiny Ministries International, keeping with the same point of that prophetic_destiny email address. And I said, well, what's going to be the motto or the mission of the ministry where Mom and Dad's was taking the word to the world by ministering at home and abroad? What was mine going to be? And so I ended up coming up with that, having the ability to cause people or help people to reach their potential, and speaking of the life and the destiny into the lives of people. And so that's how Prophetic Destiny Ministry started. And it has grown, and exactly what Mom said was going to happen really has happened. And my reach has far exceeded theirs. And when I started in ministry, I was accepted because I was Mom and Dad's son. Now, because of my reach and because of what God's doing with me, there's been a shift and a reversal. And now people know of Leo and Edith Fram because they know that they are my parents. Now when people meet them, it becomes, oh, you're Michael's parents. And now they are automatically accepted because they're the ones and exactly what Mom saw and what she said is exactly what happened. And so that became the starting point of Prophetic Destiny Ministries, to speak into the destiny of every believer. And that's really been the focus of what God has, put on my heart and become really one of the mandates of my ministry. And it's manifested now in multiple ways. And you can find out a lot more about me and what God's called me to do if you just visit the website, as well as all the places where I'm ministering. There's links to my books, my blogs, and all the places you can find my videos. All that is on that website. So I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what you brought me here to talk about, which was the heart of a father. And we began last week by talking about an example of what happened that altered my life and changed it forever. In the fall of 2015, when God spoke to me and said, it's time for you to do for others what Leo did for you. Not only did it change my life and alter the trajectory of my ministry because I knew what Leo did for me, but something really supernatural happened to me that day when he said that. And the only way I can frame it or explain it is to kind of steal something from Dad Hagen. And I don't know who's old enough to remember a jukebox, but you go into the restaurant or a diner and every booth had a portable jukebox in it, and you could put a quarter in and listen to your favorite song. And you press a number, press a letter, boom, and all of a sudden that song played and you could hear it. But when you would drop that quarter in that jukebox, you would hear the sound, especially if they just emptied it, you would hear the sound of that quarter go clink. back in the days before everybody had a cell phone. Now we'd be lost without our cell phones. But back in the day, you could go to a payphone, and you would when I first started using payphones here in the States, it was 10 cents to make a phone call. And you would drop the dime in, and that's where the expression dropping a dime came from. It became known in the criminal world as dropping a dime, making a call on somebody. Well, it used to be a dime to use a payphone. Then inflation, it became a quarter to use the payphone. But when you would do that, again, you would hear that clink as that coin dropped into the box of that payphone or of that jukebox. I remember Dad Hagin telling us the story how he was out traveling in field ministry after he had pastored for 12 years, moved out into field ministry, and one day the Lord said to him, he gave him a new assignment. He gave him a new commission. And he said, go and teach my people faith. And he said, when God said that to him, it was just like somebody dropped a quarter in a payphone or a jukebox, and he felt something drop in his spirit, and it went clink. He felt it when it dropped into his spirit. He said, and all of a sudden, he had a gift to teach. Up until that time, he was strictly a preacher. In the early days in Dad Hagin's ministry, he would preach like a house of fire. And later on, when God gave him that commission to go teach my people faith, all of a sudden he had a teaching gift. And his ministry changed because he could now teach, where before he didn't have the ability to teach. He was strictly a preacher. Well, in like fashion, when God spoke to me and he said, now it is time for you to do for others what Leo did for you, the same thing happened to me. I had that same sensation of somebody dropping a quarter like into a jukebox or a payphone. And all of a sudden, a father's heart dropped in my spirit. I never had a father's heart. And coming up as an evangelist, you know, believe me, I would preach 90 miles an hour and speed up from there. I had a dear friend at the time who used to say to me, God, you don't even breathe. It was just like a machine gun. It was just rapid fire, hot and heavy and fast. That was my MO. And my motto was, listen, my job is just to preach. Whether you get it or not, that's not my job. My job is to preach. Just leave your feet out there and let me stomp all over your toes. If I hurt your feet, don't worry, God will heal them. That was my mindset. I just wanted to get to the prayer line at the end so I can line them up and mow them down. And it was like, the old Gallagher concerts when he would do Sledge-O-Matic. You used to have to wear the rain poncho if you were in the front row. Well, if you were in the front row in the days that I was preaching like that, I would baptize the first 3 rows with spit real easy. It would either be spit or sweat or both, depending on how I was going. And I wasn't concerned about another generation. I wasn't concerned with those that were coming up behind me. I wasn't concerned with pouring into others like Leo poured into me. But all of a sudden, when God said that, a father's heart dropped in my spirit. And what I was never, even though I was teaching, even though I was preaching, and I'd been doing it since I was 17 years old. You got to realize I was born in 1962.
Me too.
And I started teaching and preaching when I was 17 years old. So I started preaching in the late 70s. And in 2015, God says I'm already, 30 plus years in ministry. And God says to me, now pour into others what Leo poured into you. And a father's heart dropped in my spirit, and I felt it when it hit. And I began to be concerned. There's a generation that's coming up behind me that they haven't had anybody pour into them like Leo poured into me. There's a generation that have never been mentored. They've never had anybody take them under their wing. They've never had anybody teach them the basics of homiletics, of hermeneutics, of exegesis. They've never had anybody validate their life or their calling. They've never had anybody speak into their destiny. And I began to be consumed with the thought of people, even as Jesus said how he cried over Jerusalem, that as a mother hen, I have wanted to gather you under my wings as little chicks, but you would not let me. I began to feel like that. The heart of a father was now in my spirit, something that had never been there before. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how to navigate this. This was totally new to me. I was no expert at being a father. All I knew is I now had a heart for it that I never did before. And all of a sudden, I had this concern that who's going to train them? Who's going to love them? Who's going to affirm them? Who's going to speak into their lives? Who's going to do for them what Leo did for me? I never thought that way. 30 plus years in ministry. Not once did it ever cross my mind. But now it's in my heart. Now, just because it's in my heart does not mean that I can now operate in it proficiently. There took a need for me to yield to that heart of the Father, to manifest a father's heart. And a lot of times people receive a call or a commission. Number one, you've got to say yes. You've got to be willing and yield to what the Father drops in your heart. You can't manifest what Father drops in you if you don't yield to it. And so I had to say yes to the will of the Father. It wasn't in my makeup. I didn't have, when the Bible talks about train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. That means the gifting and the bent of the child. Well, my bent was not to pour into other people. That wasn't a gifting that I had. My gifting was very aggressive. It was very emotional. It was very much fire. There wasn't a whole lot of tenderness. I know we sing songs, even secularly, try a little tenderness. Michael didn't have any. There was no tenderness there. It was there, but tenderness was not there. And so I began to yield to that Father's heart. And as I began to yield to that Father's heart, I found myself beginning to change in my attitudes, in my desires, and how I wanted to reach people. And what we've got to understand is that God's intention has always been for fathers to pour into sons. It has always been the biblical pattern. And so I grew up in a way where I knew how a father would treat people because of how my father treated me. But I also noticed that I wasn't the only one he ever did that for. Even when my father was a Baptist pastor, I watched him pour into others. Even when he was a youth pastor running the youth group, he would mentor young men. And I've seen people that he would constantly pour into. He had such patience. I was not long on patience. I'll be honest with you. I've gotten much more patient even now in, running a mentoring group for multiple years now. Every once in a while, somebody will send me a private message while we're in the mentoring group. We do them through Zoom. Even last night, somebody just said, "Boy, you're so patient. I'm just watching how patient you." They were getting flustered by somebody just going on and on and on. And they said, "You're so patient." I wasn't always, but it's the heart of the Father. And the heart of the Father has been dropped in my spirit that now I can demonstrate a Father's heart. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't always that way. Now I joke about it and I say, instead of the screaming evangelist, sometimes I've become the mushy apostle. Well, what changed that? The heart of the Father. And so a Father's heart is manifesting because his heart dropped in my spirit and made such an impact. So I just want to lay a little bit of biblical foundation with the rest of this broadcast and with next week's broadcast, and just set this thing that the Father's heart is the biblical pattern. Always has been and always will be. Let me go right back to the beginning of recorded history. And, when you look at the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew's gospel, you have the man's side of the genealogy. In Luke's gospel, you have the lady's side. That's a great way to remember it. Matthew, M for man. Luke, lady. L for lady. And it's really Mary's genealogy, but it's talking about the males, but on Mary's side. And it traces the genealogy all the way back to which was the son of, the son of, the son of, the son of, the son of. And we read all of that son of, the son of, the son of, and we say, son of a gun, I'm tired of the son of. Well, it's not just fluff and filler. Because when you read in Luke's gospel, it says the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. Mm. The genealogy starts with Adam being God's first created son. You also see that when Pharaoh was keeping Israel in captivity and in bondage, the instruction was not just to let my people go, but it was to let my son go, that they may worship me. So Adam was the first created son, and Israel was God's first nation son. So all the way back in the Old Testament and in the genealogy, we see that there's a father-son order, that God as a father creates a human son for fellowship with him. And he creates a nation son in the children of Israel. Let me go a little further. Let me go into the book of Exodus, obviously the Old Covenant. Exodus chapter 3, verse 6. He said also, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So here we see God identifying himself as a multi-generational father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Mm-hmm. We see 3 generations there, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. It's sonship. It's father to son. It's father to son. In Exodus 3, verse 15, same chapter, God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, And this is my memorial name to all generations. So I want you to understand that God has always been about fathers to sons. And it's always been multi-generational that should be passed down from one to another. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob. And God's saying, I'm the God of. I am the God of. And he's showing that relationship from father to son and father to son. It was that way in the natural, and it's that way spiritually and in the kingdom. So where I want to take you next week is to showing you not just the natural side of this, but also the spiritual side of this, and then see how that the heart of the Father is for there to be a spiritual lineage and a spiritual descendant from father to son, that you see the heart of a father has always been God's intention. We'll pick this up next week.
Amen. Amen. Apostle Michael, I just want to ask you one question. Can you just take us a minute and or two and just clarify for people who might not understand that when you talk about the spiritual fathers and the fathers and sons, it's not just men. It's we use the term fathers and sons. You know what I mean? But also women can be a spiritual.
Well, absolutely. In the kingdom, it says that in Christ, there's neither male nor female, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither bond nor free. So when we speak of fathers and sons, we're not speaking about gender, we're speaking about identity. It's about identity, not gender. I always tell people this: listen, if I can be the bride of Christ, then ladies, you can be a son of God. It's not about gender, it's just about role and identity.
I love that. If I could be the bride of Christ, you could be. I love that. That's perfect, because I know in the areas where I live and stuff like that, that wouldn't just be a common knowledge. And I really was confused. I think when I first ever heard, about everybody being a son, I would think, well, I'm not a son, I'm a daughter. But then I began to listen to what they were saying, and I got it. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much. I just love hearing this teaching, because it just brings everything together about our purpose and God's plan, and that we're not alone, and that God, it's just an amazing thing to know that we're not walking alone, that God has specifically put people in our lives to be able to help us to fulfill our destiny. Because I know there's a lot of people that maybe feel like they're walking alone, but God has people lined up for you. He has people in your life, planned in your life to help you to fulfill what he's called you to do. So we're going to be ending this program. Thankfully, there is a part 3 that will be coming up next Friday night, 7 p.m. Atlantic, 6 p.m. Eastern. Before we do sign off, I want to mention an upcoming convergence that is happening. Now, convergence is kind of like a conference, and it's being hosted by Love and Unity Movement. You can go to www.love-unity.org. I should know that by now. And you'll be able to see on there, you can be able to see all the information about this upcoming convergence that's happening in Toronto, Canada. I'm one of I think maybe at this point still, there might be one other Canadian host, and they do music. So I'm pretty much the only Canadian host that's on Kingdom First TV. But we are excited to have this ministry come to Canada. We're excited to see what God's going to do through Love and Unity Movement in Canada. And coming up September 29th and 30th at the Doubletree Hilton, or Hilton by Doubletree, whichever it's called, near Pearson International Airport, is going to be a 2-day convergence. And those dates again are September 29th and 30th. If you go on that website that I just mentioned, you will be able to find a whole section that is talking about this convergence. You can go on there and you can register. It is a